Alright, time for some more bad lighting reviews, but we don't want a big bright light behind me. That seems to cause more problems. So is lighting things on fire. This is Crude, the oil goon. I actually bought this new, on sale of course, but you know. Usually I pick up my Euro stuff used because, I don't know. It's usually cheaper that way, but this was one I was interested in, and it ended up, I don't know, cool stuff or something like that. Something that I could get pretty cheaply, and it helped cut my shipping or something. I don't remember quite what the circumstances were. Let's talk components first, for whatever reason. The box isn't very, it's kind of flimsy, but then they give you this very, very sturdy box inside to hold the pieces and to protect them. But this thing's going to fall apart over time, even with that inside of it. The board, well, so this sucker, the main play board, confused the hell out of me because of the way it is. And I don't think there's anything you can do about it, but basically a player doesn't have a corner, they have this portion. And when you divide it up that way, it's just troublesome for me to comprehend. I'm sure it's easier when you're playing just one player. Now, when both times I played it, once was two-player, and I found it confusing then too. Where I'm playing across the board and next to myself. It just felt too often that I was going for stuff the other player had. Like I'd be here and I'd want to deal with both of these together because they're next to each other. And I'm sure you could start to play that way, but then, you know, you wouldn't align properly with the rest of the board. Otherwise, it's functional and reasonable quality. This thing works just fine. The only part that I don't like about it is the pictograms down here in the phase summary. They don't make any sense to me. I mean, I can figure them out if I think real hard about them, what they're talking about. And you can look. So like here, they talk about, okay, money, oil, gas goes into what? Domestic market here or world market here. That's what they're kind of talking about. So you can either pay money, oil, or gas, and you put them into there, and you get the opposite, money, oil, or gas. Then over here, phase 2 and 3, which is where the die rolls are assessed. Hey, it tells you what you can do here, sort of, kind of. I don't know what this 3 plus 4, that's saying you have to hit twice to turn an oil well into this, but if you succeed with either die, and I mean why 3, 4, I don't know, you know, whatever. If you succeed with any of these, this is what you can do. So an oil well produces 2 oil, refinery and an oil produce a gas station and a gas produce a customer market where you get to sell something there. I don't think it's terribly helpful to have that, but it also doesn't do any real harm. The rule book was pretty good. I don't like the glossy paper, of course, but that's pretty standard these days, at least for Euros. I found it fairly clear. The only part that really killed me was the starting setup. That was, you know, that's kind of a painful thing to read. I remember on first read through I was a little confused between the consumer market and selling gas elsewhere, but as soon as you start fiddling with the pieces, you see it. Awesome dice. I want to steal them, but I have plenty of good dice. I don't really need that. The quality of the tiles for these guys is outstanding, obviously. As is the money quality. There's a little too little money, maybe, but you can always, you know, write something down if somebody, you know, put $1,000 in the bank each or something like that. That's fine. I get a little confused, though, with the coin money and the bills, which is that the bills are kind of small and you can lose track of them pretty easily when you got a lot of coins. The coins look more obvious. These big plastic pieces, hey, for most of them, there seem to be enough, and they don't have any real problem. The only one there's a real problem with there is the little derricks. If you play the way I do, and it may not be the best way to play, but at least one of the strategies that most of my players used was to just cover the board with the derricks. You run out of them, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. It would be easier and cheaper, perhaps, if they used counters for everything. I don't see too much additional functionality or beauty being given by these hunks of plastic. I know people like them, but I'm not particularly fond. Where things get ugly is with these oil barrels, because on the board there's no depression or anything for them to sit in, so they slide around a little too easily. Plus, when they fall, they roll all over the place. And there's also not enough of these, at least not enough of the oil, of the crude. The gasoline, there seemed to be enough for my game. And I think no matter what your strategy, you're going to be in danger of running out of oil, depending on how the markets are. What about the play? Well, you can see where this was, you know, a very cool game in its day. There's no question of that, like Acquire, like some of the other 3M games. Executive Decision, which is just really pure, almost pure strategy. Mr. President, which has a decent amount of luck. This took a different paradigm than that sort of standard family game type of stuff in its era. And I like it for that. There's no question there. Yet it still gives that feel of a family game in the sense that you don't have to overthink this thing. And in fact, if you do, you may get yourself in some trouble. But there is a fair amount of luck in it, which particularly bothers me because it's sort of this end game back-ended luck that kind of, you know, we had somebody run from towards the very back of the pack to a second place finish in the game I played based on the luck of the dice. But there was some control of other players, kind of like in a Scrabble game. It was the defensive play by another player that allowed them to do that, trying to prevent a third player from coming in first, who was a close second. The actual system of the play is fairly easy. Other than dealing with those little round barrels and possibly knocking them over and some of the other stuff, there's not any real complexity, any mechanical complexity in terms of actually playing the game. Mental complexity, well, there are a couple of different, the rules are simple enough, but there are a couple of different strategies that you can take. One, there are a few that look obvious. One that looks obvious that doesn't work is trying to manipulate the oil and gas markets. You can't make money that way. The margins are too thin, and there's not enough cash on them. The ones that look interesting are trying to build a production supply line to run, you know, to generate oil, to convert it into gas, and then to sell it at your gas stations. Now, you can truncate some of that, and it may make the market a little more interesting. Nobody really tried to do this in a large scale, but you could, say, have refineries and gas stations and not worry about producing the oil too much. Not go for the whole sort of pipeline that you could run. And then you could just buy up oil when it's cheap and process it and then sell it as gas. Or alternatively, you could just buy up gas and sell it and say, screw it, I'm just going to go with gas stations. and I can make a good deal of money there. We didn't see a lot of me exploring those options, mainly because when I did try something along those lines, it didn't work terribly well in my game. And my wife was in a better position to do it the way she was playing, but she kind of neglected buying up large quantities of stuff and trying to run it that way. I think that's an alternative that may work. The two that I really emphasized here was trying to build the pipeline, from drilling to look for oil, to running the oil wells, to processing it, to selling it. And only one person did that for the most part. I mean, everybody took it to a little bit, but one person went heavier in that direction, whereas everyone else, at least after the first stage of the game, kind of went into investing in assets, which is definitely valuable. But if everybody's doing it, it does seem like it hurts, and it may actually be the weaker strategy. Well, I don't think it's the weaker strategy. It's sort of a flat strategy. You'll make this money or not, and you rely on die rolls, as you do with everything, to see whether or not you get to sell your stuff when you want to, when the market peaks. The problem is, with only one person really channeling a good deal of gas going through at all times, I think he kind of was able to maybe obtain more from that market than he would have if somebody else had jumped in on it. Of course, if somebody had jumped in on the, wow, oil's really cheap, I shouldn't even bother making that. I should get rid of my oil production capability as quickly as possible, worry about buying oil and then refining it and selling it, because gas never went down in this game. There was an opportunity for that to work, I think, as well in this game. And I think there's room for it to work in different ways depending on what other people choose. So there's actually a lot of room in terms of sort of broad strategies that you want to follow. You don't want to get stuck in one, though. If an opportunity comes along and it's a very good one, you want to take it. So, if you're in a position where you have a fair amount of cash, it's a lousy economy, well, it's kind of hard not to buy a bunch of oil wells. Maybe not cover your whole thing with them because you want more room for your other production to work. The other question is, do you want to sell as soon as your other assets, as soon as you get to sort of the best price and you get the availability to do so, or do you want to hold them and run them a little longer and hope that you get to sell them before the end of the game? And these are just the kind of things you have to decide. Overall, I find it fun, but I don't think that it has the same kind of, I don't know. I don't think it has the same kind of holding power that, say, Acquire does for some people. But there's something really cool about, rolling the dice and seeing whether or not things come, the risk management element of it and everything in that. And I think it's a pretty good game. It's just, I don't know how often I would want to play it. But that's, most games I don't want to play terribly often. But it really does put you in a feel of running an operation where there's a market influence in play, and it gives a lot of good atmosphere to it, and works pretty well in that way. So, using a power grid like economic system, it seems to work perfectly fine. And gives you a nice abstract view of things. It's not going to give you the reality of trying to speculate on the oil and gas markets. I think the margins on those are just far too small for the way the game, for trying to call the game some sort of simulation. But the other aspects of it do feel reasonable to me. Obviously, I'm not an oil executive. I don't know shit about this. Just like, when you talk about power grid, It's like, well, I don't really know anything about the energy industry, but at an intuitive level, there's a lot that makes sense here, and that makes me happy. If a game doesn't succeed in matching sort of my very naive grasp of economics and of markets, then I worry a great deal about why it's working the way it is. So overall, yeah, I think this is definitely a worthwhile purchase for me, and you know, it's one that I'm more likely to keep than a lot of. I don't get rid of anything, but I really want to. So, I mean, there's games that I say, you know, I'm never going to play that again. I just don't enjoy it enough. This is one that I think both my wife and I enjoyed enough that we'll get it played some more. Some of the others, I really question why I even own them. And, well, this one was enough fun that I think it serves its purpose well enough. All right, let's send it up.